Hey, this is Terrence Lachey, and I'd like to thank you for tuning in to this podcast, The Growth Exchange. This podcast was designed to curate conversation, dialogue, and monologue around all things growth. I believe that everything living has the potential to grow into its fullest and most maximal potential. So let's grow. Hey, welcome to another episode of The Growth Exchange. I'm Dr. Terrence Lachey, and excited to have the opportunity. These are kind of the inaugural editions of what we're attempting to do in bringing you information, conversation, curated as well as otherwise, topics that all center around growth, helping people to grow, understanding the concept and the idea of impact of growth beyond our faith, beyond our demographics, beyond the communities in which we live. The possibilities are endless. So thank you for tuning in today. I've got a special guest, and I'm really excited and honored to be able to introduce her and give her an opportunity to tell us a little bit about growth. This is none other than Dr. Keli Christopher.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Welcome to the show.
I'm so happy to be here.
I'm glad you're here. I'm glad, especially on a short notice.
No
we're in
problem.
the middle of the winter wonderland right now. So we're just going to have some conversation and
Yeah.
dialogue. STEM Greenhouse is the focus. And then, of course, all things growth. Let's talk a little bit about that. We'll start out just from the top. What's your concept and idea behind growth, whether it's the academic element, whether it's the independence of being able to be an entrepreneur, which you are. But tell us, what's your take on growth?
Well, I named my organization STEM Greenhouse. And so greenhouse itself, it's a metaphor. Some people think we actually have a greenhouse somewhere.
Right, and you're growing plants.
Right. But the reality is that we want to see children of color grow in their proficiency in math and science, their belief and confidence that they can do all the things that they want to do. STEM is a part of it, but that's not everything. We want them to have options. And you can only have options if you have a firm foundation to grow from.
I'm inspired by you and your faith. You obviously have that as an integral part of what it is that you're doing. Your definition of growth, like I said, starts at the greenhouse,
Yeah, yep. And I even, there's a parable where Jesus talks about throwing the seeds and some landing on rocky places or with thorns and things like that. And I found that in terms of getting children to be successful in school and things like that, we tend to just throw seeds around, but we're never curating a space for them to actually take off and grow.
Being intentional.
There's no intention behind it. You have an event one time and think that that's miraculously going to change someone's life.
They did a good job.
Yeah, or even, hey, Dr. Christopher came and spoke once, but what more? You need more than that.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of like trying to lose weight or get healthy or something. Someone who has a personal trainer is going to be more successful than the person who watched the infomercial. Yeah. You see it one time and then you're just off on your own. We wanted to provide those spaces where kids would have lots of time to
So
grow.
really what I'm hearing is that STEM Greenhouse, this vision of yours that you came up with, and we'll talk about the inception as well as the growth of that, but it's all about being intentional. It sounds like there's an intentionality behind using math, science, technology, those things that most people, like you said, are one-offs. Like, oh yeah, he did good in biology in school. He should have been a doctor. Or she was really, really into math. I don't know why she didn't follow engineering. Yeah. Well, you're on the front end of this, and you're affecting lives in a very positive way. For that, the community thanks you, especially since you're targeting people of color, children of color, the underrepresented and often marginalized, even at the higher education level.
Absolutely.
Some of the work that you've done with another organization for moms and children, Jack and Jill's been around forever, 75, 80 years, hosting students on college campuses for Saturday sessions, workshops, science fairs. Let's talk about all of that, because you probably feel uncomfortable kind of itemizing it, but I've watched the growth. How many years has it been since you started?
Yeah, we just celebrated our 10th anniversary in November.
Congratulations.
So, it's a major milestone, and I think the amount of growth we've seen in that time is also a very interesting story, because it wasn't a linear
Journey.
path.
Exactly.
It was more of a parabolic growth pattern. So there are a lot of things that I think people assume about this sort of work. And they may see me now and think that it was just smooth sailing all the way, but
no.
yeah, of course not.
There's some bumps in the road along the way, life challenges, changes.
Uh-huh.
There was even some sad moments,
Oh,
as well
yeah.
as some happy moments. 10 years though, that means that if a child was in the program 10 years ago, they're 20 now.
Yeah.
Isn't that
Well,
scary?
I mean, it just sort of depends. I started working with a lot of middle school students, but then some elementary.
Sure.
When I first started, in those, there's some of those kids are in graduate school now. So,
Isn't that something?
yeah.
And you had your hand in that.
Well, I would like to believe it takes a village.
Absolutely.
So, I played my part, and I think that's what the community should strive for.
Sure.
There's no one thing that I can't do everything for a child, and
Right, right.
no organization.
No one person can.
Yeah, no one person, no one organization can do that. But if we all use our strengths and those things that God has gifted us to have, then we'll get a lot more things for
Exactly.
our kids. Yeah.
I really like what you said about the village that it takes in order to raise children or to grow, leaders. What if we talk in your language and instead of saying the village, let's look at it as a laboratory. Let's look at it as a lab, or let's look at it as an opportunity of
Yeah.
test and trial, maybe even some type of facility of sorts in which we are learning the possibilities, whether they're mathematical, whether they're scientific, whether they are logistics. All of those things play a part in what it is that you offer to families. I don't want to just say to kids or to children, but families are impacted. We were teasing, or I mentioned that if it was 10 years ago that you started and you had a 10-year-old, they're 20, but you've got graduate school students that have been impacted by STEM Greenhouse.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that laboratory as opposed to it just simply being a village. It's a laboratory in a village.
Yeah, well, I would say that a lot of like if you're trying to develop a laboratory, how can I produce a child who is interested and has all the things they need to be successful in a STEM career? Well, I had all of those things.
Okay.
My life experience
Yes.
gave me those things, so I knew what to do. Very few people can have a PhD in engineering, period.
But African American women,
Yes, even
African
less.
American, I mean, we can continue to go on with the demographics.
Most people don't know a white person with a PhD in engineering, let alone a black woman.
Well, doctoral degrees are few and far between.
Exactly.
Anyway, even though we hear a lot of people with doctoral degrees.
They're few and far between.
Small percentage.
So, I had a lot of different experiences, and I knew which ones were better, which ones didn't impact as much.
Yeah.
I knew a lot of the things that I was seeing were things that were designed by people who weren't in STEM careers, and they were creating STEM programming, or they had STEM careers, but they were white people who didn't really understand children of color and what
Exactly.
it takes to be in those spaces.
And our environmental background.
Exactly.
Our environmental background does not afford us the luxury of being able to walk into a lab and understand what things are.
Yeah.
From a Bunsen burner to a beaker,
Well, we definitely want our kids to have those things because I remember one of the reasons I was successful in graduate school was simply because I came in at such a high level. But I was thinking about it recently how when you are a person of color, especially a woman of color in these spaces, you don't have the luxury of just being average.
Absolutely.
You have to be above average all the time. And fortunately, I had sort of developed that resilience and that expectation, but it was still very difficult. And I don't think people understand what it takes to be in those spaces where if you're not outstanding, you're not going to be respected.
Sure.
And it's almost like you're invisible. In fact, they try to make you invisible. If you could just disappear, they'd be
Sure.
much happier.
Yeah. But this conversation is really going well, and it's all about growth. What
Yeah.
I hear you saying is that you grew into this standard of excellence that you have.
Yes.
You maintain that, but you also have decided to take it to another step and then to give back.
Yeah.
So in the context of growth, when did you know you wanted to be in science and and technology and engineering and math, those things? When did STEM become a part of your life? And let's grow from there.
Well, I will say that it was not something that I would have considered for myself as a young person. When I was in sixth grade, well, really when I was in third grade, I sort of decided I wasn't a math person. The whole timed multiplication test, that was super scary to me. I had a lot of anxiety around that. And I just decided I wasn't good at that, and I just moved on with my life. But
Now,
when
is that typical, do you think, among those of us who weren't exposed to a lot of those things preemptively?
well, I know, and one of the reasons I started this work with a girls' math club was because I didn't know any women who liked math.
Okay.
So it's just very easy to just think, well, that's not for me. And when I was in 7th grade, I had a counselor who put me in honors math, which just seemed absolutely ridiculous. So I went to her and I said, I don't want to take honors math. And she said, well, you got honors English, just, try it out.
Roll with it, right?
I did not want to do it. I cried. I went home, told my mom, I can't do honors math. And my mom called the counselor to try to get me out of it. The counselor said, no, just let her try it one semester. And if she doesn't like it after the first semester, we'll switch her then. Well, at this point, I guess so I didn't want to be embarrassed, I didn't want to look stupid. Right. So I started trying, which that was the key. I had never really tried.
There you go.
And what we learn in elementary school in math is just memorization, really. And the faster you are, the better. But as you progress in math, it's not about being fast. It's about logic. And yes.
Yeah, literally.
And so I liked algebra, which is what we were learning in 7th grade. And that was just different than just multiplication tables. And I realized I was getting the best grades in math. And I also kind of got an idea of how I learned better, trying to just perfect it so I could do better in the class.
Yeah. It sounds like you had some supportive people. Too.
Yeah, I mean, some people who believed in me when I wasn't even really good. You know what I'm saying? So that's something that I bring to the table. Even when I talk to kids now, they may hate math, and I'll say, yep, and I hated math too, and now I have a Ph.D. in engineering.
Exactly.
Math became my favorite subject. By the time I graduated from high school, I was in AP Physics, Calculus, all the things. I still didn't want to go into STEM because I didn't see any women of color. No, I didn't.
Sure, you didn't see people who looked like you in that area.
Yes, and although I will say that I didn't, it was subconscious. I didn't verbalize it, but really, as I was going to different engineering companies and universities, I didn't see myself, and nobody wants to grow up to be a 50-year-old white man like I did.
So that was not your objective.
No, so it didn't seem like a plan. But then one of my friends had gone to North Carolina A&T, and she came back, and she was majoring in agricultural engineering, which I had never heard of. And I had never seen a black woman in engineering before, So I said, well, gosh, if she's doing it, well, maybe I can do it. Those things are very important. I don't know why people think that kids don't need to see these things, but it's super important. If you talk to any of my middle school students, they will say if they're a boy, they want to play basketball.
Correct.
Because they keep seeing
Those
that
are the
over and
images.
over. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
images.
So if you've never seen a black woman engineer,
you're not going to have the
it's just
aspiration.
subconscious. I didn't even really think about it. So now for these students, it's not only, well, Dr. Christopher, she's from my town.
Yeah.
She might be from my school.
Yeah.
And she was able to do it.
And I can do it too.
I can do it too.
So let's go back then. You were inspired by what you saw, meaning that some of the fuel to your fire was inspired by an example.
Yeah.
So growing to be an example promotes growth for those who are looking for an example.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get it all centered around the concept and the idea of if you never had the challenge of that science class or that AP math class, you would not have grown into the woman that you are today, breaking all kinds of barriers and being first.
Yeah.
You're a first in a lot of areas, especially this community. STEM Greenhouse is a nonprofit organization that offers opportunities for learning and development of interests in a field that qualifies them for higher incomes, better standards of living. Embellish on that, what I just said. STEM Greenhouse does what?
Well, it's more than that even.
Exactly.
Because what I found when I started doing this work, the reason I started, it was a conversation I had with a middle school student who didn't know what division was. And they were about to go to high school, and I thought, wow, you don't even know 8 divided by 4 because it's like a new concept to you. And I realized things were a lot worse than I thought. And so what STEM programming looks like perhaps in Forest Hills or a wealthy community is going to look different here. So when I started my after-school, middle school program, None of the kids getting out of 8th grade were proficient in science. None, and math proficiency was less than 10%. But then I realized they didn't have a science teacher for their middle school students. And so basically my after-school program was teaching science and doing math remediation.
What should have been in the regular
Exactly.
curriculum from
But
the
what
start.
I kept finding is every STEM program was about the exposure piece when the kids didn't have the foundation in the first place. Like, if you can't add 2-digit numbers, why are we taking you around the engineering building? You know what I'm saying?
So you were breaking ground in areas that probably should have had planting all
Exactly.
along.
I realized that for me, and that's really my sweet spot. I've just decided that I just have a heart for ensuring that kids have that foundational.
I love it.
So we teach science in schools that don't have science teachers. The high school that we work with, there's no chemistry teacher there. Well, there's a Zoom chemistry teacher, but who learns chemistry on Zoom?
You know what? I think we're going to take a quick break. I
Okay.
think it's important for us to hone in on that conversation of you filling a gap in public school systems that probably should have already been established. You're filling a gap, you're meeting needs, and then it's making a greater impact. Like you
Right.
said, it's more than just, kids are exposed to a science fair or having math quiz clubs.
Yeah.
You're doing a whole lot more. I'm excited about this, Dr. Keli Christopher. We're going to take a quick break,
Okay.
station identification. We'll come right back and we'll pick up the conversation. I am so glad that you are tuned in to the Growth Exchange. This episode has been brought to you by the Growth Center, Inc., celebrating more than 20 years of making a difference. The Growth Center's mission is to impact the community and the world through meaningful partnerships, which offer resources, life skills training, and other programs that strengthen individuals, families, and communities. The Growth Center is committed to developing a Christ-centered program that helps individuals grow in every area of their lives. It makes global impact, youth development, personal empowerment, financial fitness, and scholarship promotion. The Growth Center, Inc. at www.thegrowthcenterinc.org. All right, we're back. I am so glad that you're listening to this podcast or watching via our channel. But we are talking about growth, all things growth. This is the Growth Exchange. So this conversation and dialogue epitomizes the vision behind this podcast, and that is to ignite growth, to celebrate accomplishments and achievements in personal growth, but then also inspire people to decide, hey, I can go for that. I can do that. And so just before the break, we were talking about what inspired you to go into engineering and then the fields of math and science, the whole STEM cadre, if you will. You're confident in it. I did, find out or was reminded during the break that you are the first Black woman to receive the honor of the Ph.D. in engineering in this community, but the third in the world.
Yeah.
Talk about that. Now that's growth.
Well, you can imagine what those spaces were like in graduate school. I had gone to a historically Black college undergrad and then went to the University of Illinois, which is just one of the top engineering schools in the country. And I just was a good student. Fortunately, I was a very strong student because typically engineers, they work together, they do homework together, they do their
Club.
projects together.
They got a club.
I have no club. I would stand on the outside and I'd have to do my assignments alone. I would see them working together in the libraries and things, and that just wasn't open to me. It was difficult, but I got very strong in that process,
So it was a growth opportunity.
Yeah, it was, because I had to learn everything by myself, and I also had to fight against lower expectations from educators and professors who just assumed that I got there some magical way. And it's sort of funny because when I applied to the University of Illinois, I did not put my race or gender on my application. But I was always treated like I had snuck in there somehow and gotten a free pass, to. But before I graduated, I went back to the registrar's office and gave them my race because I wanted it to be known.
Documented.
Yeah.
Well, you probably had no idea that you were breaking all kinds of barriers, but you're also making history.
Yeah.
Number three in the whole world.
Yeah, I knew by
that's
then
pretty big.
because if you can when I was going into graduate school, there was only one black woman, she was from the Caribbean, who had a Ph.D. in agricultural engineering.
In the world.
So I knew that that was the case, and
You'd also had to do your homework to know that that was not only a current status, but it was also a barrier that could be broken because somebody had done it. Sort of like the three-minute mile with Roger Bannister, and how now 3-minute mile is not an issue, but that was the first time it was done. And so you have, I guess, some examples ahead of you as well.
Yeah, although I always, like, I knew I could do it. The reason I knew I could do it because I was at Cornell one summer. I was after my sophomore year at college. And in the summertime, only graduate students are there. And so I'm like, oh, I'm at this Ivy League school. These people, those dudes were not impressive. And I'm like, wow, just average white dudes are getting PhDs. I can do this. Like I think I'm a stronger student than some of these people that I'm working with. So I knew I could do it after that. And so I had pretty much determined if that guy is getting a PhD, I need to get one too. There's just no reason.
Sure.
But they don't have they don't have that lowered expectation. Nobody looks at them like it's odd.
Right.
But for me, it is considered strange to even desire to work.
Well, even when you introduce yourself or somebody introduces you, this is Dr. Keli Christopher. The expectation is, okay, what does she have a doctorate in?
Yeah, exactly.
Or is it a earned and a legitimate doctorate degree?
Yeah, that too.
Let alone in science or in engineering. That's
yeah. Having this degree has opened some doors for me. It's legitimized the work that that I've done.
Absolutely.
And so I definitely am glad I got it. And like I said, I gained a lot and I learned a lot getting it about how to navigate these spaces and how to fight for your own. You have to advocate for yourself.
Yeah, and you recently received some awards.
Yeah.
You've been identified here in the local community, but tell us a little bit about some of your national achievements you've published, and there's quite a few things that somebody can Google and look you up and say, wow, that's Dr. Keli Christopher.
Well, I would say that when I was in graduate school, I was a national officer in about 4 organizations, including the Honor Society for Agricultural Engineers. I was the president and the vice president of that, the national secretary and other organizations. So I was really developing a lot of leadership. But I was also, when I look back on it, sort of developing a kind of a workaholic culture, which is something that I'm trying to, I'm trying to wean myself off of that. But
outgrow.
I'm trying to outgrow it. I'm trying to outgrow this because it's just always been my nature to just go above and beyond and seek out leadership outside of, just local or whatever. It's always been important to me.
I think you do an excellent job of managing it all because your personality, your demeanor is that of somebody who's calm and collected, and as well as confident. And I think that that's something to be appreciated, especially with a black woman, in America today. Have you ever experienced the imposter syndrome?
No.
Talk about that, because most people will say, "Oh yeah, I went through that," and
no, I
didn't feel like I belonged.
Well, I have always been extremely confident. Like I believe I can do anything.
Amen.
And so it rubs some people the wrong way because they want you to come humble.
But there is a spirit of humility with it. I can tell you that. Just sitting across the table from you, and we can hear it in your voice. There is some humility, but there's also this level of confidence. Like I set it as a goal. I worked for it. I achieved it. And I'm good with that. Yeah. That's fine,
And that's really what changed things for me, even in this whole philanthropy space, was realizing that I was the expert. And, even now I introduced myself to someone not too long ago. And I say, I'm the CEO and founder of STEM Greenhouse. It's the most comprehensive math and science organization for children of color in the world. And he just looked at me like, and I said, and I'm in this space. I haven't seen anybody do what we do.
There you go.
So, I take that confidence into everything I do, and I'm always excellent in outperforming other organizations that are competing for the same resources, and that's how I'm able to get some of those grants. But there was a time when, even despite my excellence, I wasn't getting funding.
Yeah.
That happened for a long time, and I had to address racism in funding, in philanthropy.
Sure.
For me to get that money, to get those resources. And it's so funny because now everybody is talking about more diverse representation in funding and all of that. But there was a time nobody really was thinking about it. But since I really brought it up as an issue, that was back in 2020,
Yeah,
I
that was
think
a pivotal time for
it was, it
a lot
was.
of businesses, entities, organizations, nonprofits
Yep.
getting off the ground, being funded in some way, supported, and then having to survive a
And I
pandemic.
tell you, I had to publicly humiliate some of these organizations
Wow.
and shame them and look at their tax returns because I said, well, if you really support the BIPOC community, 96% of your money wouldn't go to white people.
Wow.
And so, they didn't expect anybody to look at their tax returns or anything. And
A
one
little research would go a long way.
look, and then in this process, I was becoming like the expert in BIPOC funding because I was sort of that poster child for an excellent organization that was not getting money,
Absolutely.
even though I was winning all the awards, outperforming all the other organizations. And one funder asked me, well, Dr. Christopher, what percentage of our funding should go to BIPOC organizations? Because I'm the expert now, right? And I said, all of it. I said, you've been giving it to those organizations all this time. Nothing has changed in the black community. We couldn't possibly do worse than the people you've been giving money to. And she just looked at me, stunned. But guess what? I've been
That's
getting
reality.
money. I've been getting money from them ever since.
Well, you obviously open the doors too, because when
Yeah.
somebody calls into question the status quo or the current system or the establishment,
Yes.
oftentimes they're hushed quickly. Either hushed by "here, you got your money, now be quiet," or "you can't say that here," or "you have no place in this community." But I can honestly say that there's a level of respect that STEM Greenhouse has and a reputation that's building. It's been 10 years,
Yeah.
but a reputation that's building that shows growth from both the leader, the visionary, and then also the children.
Yeah.
What could somebody expect if they wanted to get involved with STEM Greenhouse as a teacher, as a student, as a parent who wants their student to just talk a little bit about interfacing STEM Greenhouse?
Well, STEM Greenhouse is a black-led organization. And
Unapologetically.
Unapologetically. It's so, I have staff that are a diverse staff of all different races, but just for example, recently we were giving out goodie bags to our students before the holidays, and I looked up and I saw white Santas on the goodie bags. I said, I need all those rebagged. Like, this is STEM Greenhouse.
Yeah.
We are all about black children. We're not going. That's not our brand, and it's so. But the people who there's some people who understand that, and it's just like getting a black child a white doll. It just doesn't make sense. So we lead with culture. The music is going to be our music. The food is going to be our food, and the kids love it. And so I would say for children who are involved, they will not only will they learn math and science, but there will be people who really love them there. You know what I mean? The
So it's
staff
community
really,
and
it's
an
community. Yep.
There are a couple locations, am I right?
Well, we have our offices, but then we also my staff work at Central High School. My high school staff work there, and then we work with 4 middle schools and a couple of elementary schools too.
Okay.
So we go to the schools that need help. So we could have a building and expect people to come to us, but that's a barrier because not everybody has transportation or parents
to
to,
where it is.
all the running back and forth that I do for my kids. Not everybody has that parent who can do all of that.
Yeah.
And so we want to make sure that we remove as many barriers as possible. I remember one time we had a reward that if they had perfect attendance, I would take them to see Wakanda Forever. Okay? And so when I took them, well, first of all, I had my African garb on, and I asked all my staff to put on their African stuff. But I had to take about 45 kids to the movies. Now, we serve about 1,000 children, but there was maybe 80 kids in that program, and 45 of them had perfect attendance.
That's awesome.
I didn't even think that many would. But one young lady, I saw her, we had got popcorn and a drink, and so she takes her cup and she takes it to the the butter dispenser, and she starts pressing the button because she didn't realize butter was going to come out of there. Our kids they're lacking a lot of things. They don't have exposure to the movies.
So there's social skills, there's cultural identity, there is challenge for academic achievement, and
Yes.
then there's just the shaping of their personalities.
Exactly. I've had a student ask me, what does putting butter on popcorn do to it? You know what I mean?
Wow.
So that just shows you we are trying to broaden their horizons, but we're also trying to bless them with those things that we would want our children to have.
This sounds
Yeah.
more like an extension of your personal life mission and,
Yes,
and
exactly.
who you are as a person. I think being unapologetically Afrocentric, I think is funny to me because I have those same thoughts and tendencies to say, I'm glad that God made me black. I have absolutely
Hey,
no problem with that.
and
And I love everybody. There's no
exactly.
challenge
There's
at
no,
all.
yep,
And you know what? If I was born white, I would love the fact that God made me white.
exactly.
I think that we have for so long tried to push that under the rug of us being different. Revelation says this, and I'm not going to turn this into a preach, but every kindred, every nation, every tongue is around that throne, giving glory and honor to a
Yeah.
God
Yeah.
who created these people in his image and after his likeness, which means that, yes, he does look like us too, as opposed to,
The
a
white,
colonialism,
yeah.
a
Yeah.
colonialized perspective. And we could go on and on about this, but
Hello.
this is growth. For somebody even listening, they're like, wow, I
Exactly.
never thought about the impact of what a white Santa would do for a black child.
Exactly. Well, or also, so this, you will have to check out my YouTube channel.
Yes.
But we recently completed like a $400,000 renovation of 3 spaces at Innovation Central High School
Okay.
that have an Afro-futuristic theme. In fact, it was
like
inspired by the Black Panther movies.
Yes, yes.
And I wanted the labs to look like Shuri's labs in
Yes.
the movies, and that's because
That's the first thing that came to mind.
And that's because I was the
You got
one
Komodo
designing
beads.
it.
You got some Komodo beads.
Listen, and I don't know any other science lab that looks like this. No computer lab looks like this. But that's what
I wanna
happens
come
when
check
you
it out.
put culture into the spaces. And what does it do for that child?
Yeah,
You
gives
know what I
them a
mean?
sense of pride.
Exactly,
the good kind.
belonging.
Yeah.
STEM is not only for white people; it's for you too. We can be excellent in math and science. So
I am so glad.
I know we our time is limited, but
Right, but no, I'm so glad
yeah.
that we are starting this conversation because I also want to do this for this podcast. Like I said, these are the inaugural editions or episodes. I want to bring you back, and I want to talk even more about what's going on with your dream, your vision, and the growth
yeah.
that has taken place. Because now, I'll share a quick secret. I thought I was going to be like this newscaster, when I was a kid. But I always knew that I'd be on this side of a microphone talking to somebody else. I would have those dreams, those visions, or even being in international spaces. And now international spaces are coming to me because I'm looking forward to seeing STEM around the world.
Amen.
I'm looking forward to STEM Greenhouse being in Africa.
Hey.
STEM Greenhouse being in Asia or STEM
Yes,
Greenhouse.
and my summer academy is the Sankofa STEM Academy.
There you go.
And that's, so as a black person creating things, I'm creating them in the way that I think will see fit. And I want to inspire young people to know that black people have been doing STEM since ancient times. We don't have to look at Dr. Christopher as
Right.
the person.
People don't know Madam C.J. Walker was doing
Listen,
STEM.
Imhotep, okay?
Imhotep. Let's go all the way back to Egypt, right?
We've been doing it. So
Yeah,
I want to make sure that they realize that this is a legacy for them.
Yeah.
They're not selling out to do math and science, which is really what a lot of us are kind of taught, is that when you're good in school, when you like math and science, that's something that white people do. You're not.
Sure.
You're losing your black card, but instead we're trying to say, nope, you're walking in the legacy of your ancestors.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're doing something that challenges all people, and not just blacks, not just whites, but you're challenging on both sides of what is oftentimes divided conversations or divided efforts.
Yeah.
There's, the black money, and then there's the white money. There's the black learning experience and the white learning experience. When I think what you're doing is removing barriers so that there can be comparable distribution of wealth, but then there could also be comparable outcomes.
Yes.
You're a scientist, period.
And,
You're an engineer, period.
And I have white students too, but guess what? They need to see black women who run organizations and be in Afrocentric spaces. Just
Well, that's what I was going to say.
And that's what we expect black children to do. So we need to make sure that everybody can appreciate.
That. Well, yeah, that's really what I'm saying as far as you're an engineer, period, but you're a black woman engineer.
Yeah.
A black woman who's made history, not just African American history or American history, but world history.
Yeah.
Because of your achievements and your accomplishments, of which we celebrate you.
Thank you.
How can people get a hold to STEM Greenhouse?
The best way will be through my website, which is stemgreenhouse.org. But you can also just email me info@stemgreenhouse.org. That'll go to our website email address.
Email box, yeah. Dr. Keli Christopher, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for this quick 30 minutes. Isn't
I
that
know,
fast?
I know. We'll have to have another conversation.
Oh, absolutely. You wait. I've already put in my mind. It's like, now this is the one that we'll do another part 2.
Yeah,
30,
it's
maybe
needed.
4 or 5.
Yeah.
And then I'd love to talk to some of the students.
Oh, wow.
I would love you to bring. Yeah, we can
We'll do
add
that.
pull up a chair and add another microphone so we can talk to some students who have been blessed by this experience called
love
STEM
it.
Greenhouse.
I love it.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Listen, you've been tuned into, listening, or watching this episode of The Growth Exchange with Dr. Keli Christopher. I'm Dr. Terrence Lachey. Glad you are here, and let's keep growing. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Growth Exchange. I'm Dr. Terrence Lachey. It's been a pleasure to have these conversations and dialogues with our guests. If you notice, one thing we all share in common, and that is the ability, the desire, and the potential to grow and maximize our fullest potential. So keep tuning in. Share this with somebody, like it, maybe even invite somebody. And if you'd like to be a guest, contact us with the information that's here and available for you. Let's grow.